Hello, everyone. Welcome to our sixth lesson. And how are you going, Anthony?
Doing good. How are you?
Good. We're all good here. Hope you guys are doing well as well. Today is our sixth lesson, and we have a very important lesson, as with all the foundation lessons in this course, simply because we're building the infrastructure to develop how we can build our spirituality. And in this lesson, we're going to take a look at the law of root and branch. Now, this is also, like I said, an important topic, because this topic will really try to get us around this concept of why the texts of spiritual writings, or the Kabbalists, let's say, because we're always talking about the wisdom of Kabbalah here, why Kabbalistic texts were written in a certain specific way. And what does it mean to really talk about spirituality with certain words? How can we even depict feelings and emotions that are inside of us with mere words when we can't even really feel what the other person feels, because we're all enveloped inside of ourselves? Now, in our previous lessons, we understood what the wisdom of Kabbalah is, why we study it, and how we study it. And we understood that this is a wisdom that allows us to discover the Creator while living in this world. And to describe the Creator is also a job on its own, simply because there's so many descriptions out there. But from the point of and the perspective of the wisdom of Kabbalah, what we can say is that the Creator is this force behind everything that created everything. And He has, we say He sometimes, but we can say the Creator has a certain attitude towards us, towards creation, or towards creatures, or towards the whole of reality. Because at the end of the day, even though we all feel our individuality, we're all a part of this reality. And the Creator has this relationship with this reality, which we are all a part of. And the way they describe that in the books, in the Kabbalistic books, is through the special text called the method of root and branch. Now, what does root and branch mean? First, let's get into that. And then what we're going to discover is how we need to read these spiritual texts that the Kabbalists are writing. Now, this language, the language of branches, is based on law of root and branch. And what the law of root and branch very simply means is this: we all live in this world. Okay, this is our reality. And we have five senses, as we learned in the perception of reality. And through these five senses, we discover inside our mind, inside our sensations and feelings, that there is a still level. Okay, let's call this the sun. Okay, on the other side of the earth, there'll be the moon, there'll be rivers, there'll be birds, humans, all kinds of things, plants included. So we have the still, the vegetative, animate, and the human level, all living in this reality, which we perceive in our five senses. Now, Kabbalists want to describe to us something beyond this reality, and they want to describe to us what is spiritual. Now, spirituality, or spiritual worlds, let's call them, can only be perceived if I have the proper sense for it. Just like we have five senses, in order for us to feel spirituality, I need an additional sense. Now, sometimes that sense is called the sixth sense, okay? And sometimes they call it a soul. So if we're living here in our current nature with five senses, we actually don't feel like we have a soul. Now, a lot of books, religions out there say, hey, we all have a soul, but Kabbalists say, well, if we had one, we'd feel it. Do we feel that we have a soul? Certainly not. If we did, we wouldn't have any problems in any case, simply because we'd already be feeling this world plus the spiritual world. And we wouldn't have we wouldn't have any dramas at all, because we'd see the whole of reality. We'd see actually how everything is operated and how everything is running, and we wouldn't have really any questions. We wouldn't have a question mark as to why I'm living, why I'm created, why we need this reality at all. Because at the end of the day, most of our lives are not so great, right? We have a lot of worries all our lives, and simply because we can't really get along with anything or anyone in between countries, people, families, everything is kind of like shattered nowadays in the 21st century. So the Kabbalists say, well, here's a little bit of a wake-up call to all of you people. We don't have a soul here. So in this reality, no soul. But we want to build one. And as we learned in our previous lessons, this is why each person who's asking himself the meaning of life has, additional to his five senses, a dot in the heart that urges him to ask that wonderful question: why the heck am I living for? Because we're born, we live in the sensation of today. Almost all of us have forgotten what we felt yesterday, the day before, forget yesterday and the day before. We don't even remember what we went through in the office today. All our feelings and sensations, we just had a rush day, and that's it. Now we're sitting in front of the, monitor, screen, and so on, and the only thing we can feel actually is right now. So when they say, listen, you're born, you live, and you die, it's just 2-3 days of life actually, because we never get to really add all the past sensations into our experience of now and today. It's just like a faint memory somewhere. But however, because we have a dot in the heart, we have the ability to build this thing called the soul. Okay? Now, the Kabbalists are saying, because we have a body here and the dot in the heart here, and the whole of reality is comprised of two realities, spirituality and corporeal reality, they're saying spirituality is the reason for everything. In other words, the cause for everything, and thus henceforth is the root for everything. So whatever happens to us in this world, how we live, what we think, what we want, whatever happens in our reality here actually has a cause in spirituality. And that cause, or the root of everything, comes down into our world as, yep, you guessed it, consequence. Or effect. There's a cause and there's an effect. Or there's a root and there's a branch. And this is where the law of root and branch really comes into effect, because the Kabbalists are saying, listen, all the roots, all the events, all the causes are in spirituality, and here we only live the outcome of things. And because we're just living the outcome of things, we really don't understand why things happen here. This is why everybody has their own personal psychology. Nobody really understands the other, and psychology isn't really even a science, because we're all different, so you can't really put anyone or any two people into the same category. You just can't, because just like our faces are different, our natures are different. Everything about us actually is different, other than the fact that we're all a desire to receive. So the things that we have inside of us as our traits are all different, just as why everybody has a different genetic structure. Everybody's DNA is different, because we're all different. And that's why everything that happens in our life is actually felt in a different way with respect to others. And that is really an elementary thing that we need to understand. But in order to understand how that all happens, the Kabbalists are saying, well, look, we have to first understand the roots. So the first job is first understand the root. Understand the root. Because if you do that, then you can understand why everything that happens in this world happens. Then second of all, you understand this world. And in order for the Kabbalists to describe to us spirituality, they sometimes use really different words that we haven't come across before, simply because we can't really relate to them in our sensations or feelings or what we saw before. For example, let's read something here from the book Kabbalah for the student. Okay, it's a big, thick green book. It's like an encyclopedia. Let's read something from here and we'll see that, they're writing about things and we have no idea what they're writing about. So I'm just going to open up Kabbalah for the student, forward to the preface to the wisdom of Kabbalah. Expansion, here we go. Expansion and departure of lights. So I'm just going to read a little paragraph, okay, and let's see how we go. After Malchut decided to receive a part of the Or Yashar and received it in the Toch, she stopped receiving. Malchut always calculates in the Rosh of the Partzuf what is the maximum light she can receive in order to bestow. Depending on the force of the Masach, Malchut receives only a very small part of the whole of the Or Yashar, since receiving in order to benefit the Creator is against her nature. Now think about it, they're talking about something spiritual which describes to us actually their relationship with the Creator. However, half of the words on there in that little paragraph are completely out of our grasp. But what they are talking about is under a strict rule that Kabbalists have, and that is that they never pronounce something that they haven't attained. In the wisdom of Kabbalah, nothing is defined or worded unless it is fully attained and fully understood. And that understanding means that I'm actually living in that sensation. I understand the cause of that sensation, the reason for that sensation, and what that sensation should be bringing to me in the next phase. So that sensation should really be a part of me and should really be guiding me towards where I need to be going further up the line. So until we feel that, we don't have a clue about why we're living in this world, what we're supposed to do, and how things are like, why they're set up the way they are. So this is why this dot in the heart, when it awakens, it starts to look for the meaning of life. And in that search, in that journey, you will, well, most people do come across the wisdom of Kabbalah, and when they do, they sometimes feel like very attached to it because their dot in the heart is very strong. And because this whole wisdom is talking about how we build a relationship with the Creator, which is actually building our relationship with the cause of everything, with the root of everything, so that we as branches can really reconcile our existence and the purpose behind everything that happens to us. Kabbalists have described everything to us in this law called law of root and branch. So everything they talk about in their books, which refers to spirituality, is actually not talking about this world at all. They're only talking about the roots, the reasons, and the causes for everything. Okay? So that's very important to understand in the beginning of the lesson. So let's read a little bit. Okay, so let's read a little bit something that we can get our heads around so we can build a direction for this lesson and course. If you have any questions, as usual, please feel free to ask them on the chat and we'll see how we go. So I'm going to read a bit more from the same book. It's just a little paragraph from the essence of the wisdom of Kabbalah. All right. Many believe that all the words and the names in the wisdom of Kabbalah are a kind of abstract names. This is so because it deals with godliness and spirituality, which are above time and space, where even our imagination has no hold. For this reason, they have decided that surely these matters speak only of abstract names, or even more sublime and exalted and abstract names, as they are completely and from the outset devoid of elements that are imagined. So a lot of people, when we talk about the wisdom of Kabbalah and they look at Kabbalistic books, they think that the wisdom of Kabbalah is just talking about things that are just not real. things that really we can't really attach ourselves to. We got nothing to hold, nothing to really grasp. In a way, we don't have anything to grasp until we enter spirituality. However, as I mentioned before, Kabbalists only write about what they've fully attained. And when they're describing to us, let's see, so we have a person here who is, let's say, studying the texts, okay, is reading Kabbalistic texts, okay, and he's studying Kabbalah. Let's say this is wisdom of Kabbalah. Wisdom of Kabbalah. Now, the split here is that the student, when he or she first starts, is in this world, but the world is talking about spiritual worlds. And because of that phenomena, spiritual worlds, in other words, sensation, spiritual sensations. So in other words, the student has really no grasp about what's going on in the text, just like we read here. But if the student had attained a certain level of spirituality and was actually in spirituality with the dot in the heart and was studying the texts, then the text would actually take on a whole different meaning, because the text is now describing the state one is in. The state one is in, and the future that needs to be attained. This is why Kabbalistic books are very important and are very special, because they're not talking about this world, but as we study the Kabbalistic texts, what happens is we attract from there, oh, there's no yellow, okay, let's do this. We attract from there what's called light. Okay. Now you might think that's a little weird. What does that mean? What does it mean to attract light? Well, have you ever observed how babies grow? They're constantly running around, right? They're always running around, they're crawling, they want to taste everything, they touch everything, they taste everything, because they want to get a grasp of everything. The power, the pushing force that makes them move, that makes them want to discover, is this inner force, inner desire, which exists in creation and exists in nature. And instinctively, babies, because they have this urge to grow, by nature, they want to move forward all the time, do things in order to attain this growing up stages. So in order to go through their growth phases, babies by nature, by default, they need to constantly move. Now, believe you and me, they're doing a very, very hard work. Imagine babies constantly trying to crawl, trying to stand up, trying to get up, trying to taste everything. Actually, they're doing really hard work trying to get their heads around where they exist. That's what they're trying to do. Where am I? What are all these things? So they have this curiosity and this huge desire to run around and learn and know everything so that they can grow up. Now, because we're already grown up, we don't have this desire anymore like kids. But what happens is, when we want to learn our future states of spirituality, we actually attract the same force that babies attract through their desire for growth as well. And that's called light. Now, in spirituality, because we're all grown up, okay, and we think we know life, or even if we have a few queries, we know how to get our heads around life and so on, because we're at that phase, we don't really have this urge for spirituality. Kids have this urge to grow up in corporeality. We have to develop this urge to grow up in spirituality. And this dot in the heart, as you know, is an urge for spirituality. Okay? So by studying Kabbalistic texts, what I'm trying to actually do is to build a desire to grow in spirituality, just like a baby has this huge desire to grow in corporeality. What is that? How does that work? Well, that works also on my dot in the heart here. It allows us to start developing spiritually because we're beginning to build this desire for spirituality. We're beginning to build this desire to go beyond our five senses. And by doing this work, by doing this spiritual work called the wisdom of Kabbalah, we begin to, by the help of this attraction of light, we begin to start developing internally. And this inner development, this internal phase of development, how we progress forward, is called attracting the light. So light isn't some kind of a fantasy thing. It actually is a strength, it's a force that exists in nature, that we pull in order to move forward to our next state, just like kids do. Okay? And the wisdom of Kabbalah allows us to attract that force. By attracting that force, we can then accordingly excel and move into spirituality. So light isn't some imaginary abstract thing. When they're talking about light, and there are a few varieties of light, there's quite a lot of types of light actually, and when they talk about these lights, they're actually talking about the influence of the creator or of that creating force upon us, and how we have this relationship with him. Just like kids are building a relationship by trying to grow up to this world, what happens is we are trying to build this relationship on our own voluntarily towards spirituality. And all these abstract things, although sound abstract to a person that exists in this world, when a person has certain minimum spiritual attainment, that person doesn't feel it as abstract. He or she really feels it as a part of that reality. Just like we have a taste for food, a smell for flowers and all kinds of essences that we can smell, or the sensation of touching. All our senses feel this reality, and in spirituality we begin to build this dot in the heart which turns into a soul. So here it actually becomes a vessel to receive the light. Okay, so it can be filled with light, and according to that sensation, according to that feeling, that person can understand the writings of the Kabbalists, can relate to them, can use them as a map to start moving forward, to start navigating in order to grow, just like a kid uses everything in this world, including his or her parents, to grow up. So that is what they're talking about. So all the things they're writing about in Kabbalistic books, texts, they're not talking about this world, but they're talking about a higher level of perception, a higher level of existence. And by studying, we're building this desire to live there, to exist there, to feel those spiritual sensations, and to add upon our five senses a sixth sense, a soul, so we can feel that world just like we feel this world as real. So everything they're talking about is true, but we just have to go there to really feel and live it. But that is not the case. Let's read a little bit more from the same article, The Essence of the Wisdom of Kabbalah. But that is not the case. On the contrary, Kabbalah uses only names and appellations that are concrete and real. It is an unbending rule for all Kabbalists that anything we do not attain, we do not define by a name or a word. So this is a very, very strict rule, because if they don't adhere to this rule, it won't be true. it'll just be a lie. It'll be some kind of a mystical belief, or it'll turn into some kind of a, I don't know, religion or something, which just turns into gossip. So Kabbalists took special care in the past generations to ensure that all their students understood exactly what they were talking about, and that their attainment was their primary goal, so that this wisdom could be passed on from one teacher to a student in its exact truthful way. And in order for them to come to that truthful way, they had to develop this soul, which we're going to do as well with the wisdom of Kabbalah. And you'll be happy to know it's not that difficult, because we have friends to help us out. We have a really good group and a really nice environment where we can actually come and study and learn, and to see how we can develop that spiritual feeling to enter into this new realm, which is currently completely concealed and out of our senses all the way. All right. Now, the language of branches. Now, Kabbalists, although they're always talking about the spiritual worlds, also have to describe to us certain things from this world. So sometimes, let's do this. So for a student, let's say, who's studying the wisdom of Kabbalah, here's the book. Okay, so studying Kabbalistic books, authentic Kabbalistic books. Now in the first lesson, we talked about what the wisdom of Kabbalah was and what it wasn't. Okay, so you guys know that authentic Kabbalistic books only talk about the relationship between us, okay, of the person and the Creator. The Creator is up there. We don't feel the Creator at the moment. It's okay, but we have a dot in the heart, so we have a potential to really do that. Now, the Kabbalists, they want to talk to us about spirituality. Why would they have a need to write about this world? We already see this world. What's there to talk about? All we have to do is research it in science and find out. So Kabbalistic books never talk about this world, but sometimes they use words from this world, okay, to describe to us what's in spirituality. So they use the language of branches in order to describe the roots. And that's why sometimes when Kabbalistic books are read, people think that Kabbalists are talking about this world. That's nonsense. There's nothing to talk about this world. Everything is right in front of our eyes. What do we need to talk about? Sun pops up, sun goes down, we go to work, we come home, we eat, we drink, we live, we have, I don't know, family, food, sex, money, honor, knowledge, and then we die.
It seems quite simple.
That's right. Okay, animals live that way as well. Okay, if you look at chickens, chickens also walk on their two legs, and they go in and they go out of their little, what do you call that place again?
Chicken coop.
Chicken coop. Okay. You can tell I'm not a farmer. Okay. So they go in and out. They go out in the morning, they feed. They come back in the evening when the sun's setting. They wake up again with the rooster when the sun comes up, and they do the same thing again. Now, we humans do the same thing as well. And in the morning, you can get some fresh eggs. See, they're going through the same process, living on two legs, right? What differentiates us from animals is this specific dot in the heart. So what we want to do is actually use that dot in the heart so that we can elevate ourselves to the level of the roots by studying the wisdom of Kabbalah. And by studying the wisdom of Kabbalah from the roots, we influence our soul. Okay? And that influence should therefore take us up to the roots. So everything they're talking about is about the roots, but sometimes they use words from here. For example, the word light. Okay, when we're talking about the word light, it could mean anything from the light in this room to sunlight, because it has all kinds of, from candlelight to, I don't know, torchlight, sunlight, fluorescent light, whatever. But when they're talking about light, they're specifically referring to the Creator's relationship, his influence on us. Because his influence on us is described as his impact, his effect. And that's called light. So to get all these definitions right is a specific teaching. It requires a specific teaching, a specific way of studying the wisdom of Kabbalah, which we talked about last week as well, so that we could really get our heads around it and start slowly massaging our sensations to that direction, so we can kind of like move ourselves to a new perception of observation, to a new angle of observation, to a new perception point, where we can kind of take ourselves out of the current perception we're in and start to look at things from a different perspective. Now, what else are they talking about? So this is the language of branches. Each lower world is an imprint of the world above it. Hence, all the forms in the higher world are meticulously copied in both quantity and quality to the lower world. Now, as we learned previously, when we discussed where we come from, as you know, the Creator first created all of us in perfection. Sometimes in the books it is written as Adam was in the Garden of Eden. Well, this is Garden of Eden here. He was feeling great. There was just Adam and the Creator, completely united, completely together, just like two great friends having a great time. However, Adam in this state wasn't really conscious about the Creator's ability and thoughts and intentions. He was like a little child, a little baby in the arms of his mother. The Creator obviously wants him to be a grown-up, just like the Creator. So he sent Adam through something called the sin, through 5 worlds. Now these worlds, I think we've mentioned before. If we haven't, here's the first time then. Adam Kadmon, the world of Atzilut, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asya. And these are the spiritual worlds that, these are the spiritual worlds that the Kabbalists are talking about. And we have no idea. We have no idea what these worlds are actually. Let's do it like this. Okay? Because as you know, we're stuck here. Okay? Now when they're talking about worlds and how all the worlds are like imprint of each other, they have everything inside of them that the upper world has. So all the lower worlds and all the upper worlds actually include everything inside themselves. Just like this world includes everything. In this world we have the still level, the vegetative, the animate, and the human level. So the spiritual worlds also include inside of them the whole of reality. And what they're saying is that everything that's here is also imprinted here. This is why Kabbalists say the whole of reality is inside a person, just like we studied in the perception of reality. Everything is inside of me. So the spiritual worlds are actually talking about our sensations and their quantity and quality our sensations and their quantity and quality with our connection to the Creator. This is all that they're talking about. How at every stage we have a relationship with the Creator. Just like when a child is growing up, at every age, at every growth period, or a growth, how do they call it, a growth spurt or a growth burst, something like that. Babies have those little, growth
spurts.
Growth spurts, that's it. And every time a baby has that growth spurt, it's like having a new relationship with the mother and the father and everything. So as kids grow up over time, what happens is they build a relationship with their parents, with reality. They have friends, grandparents, all kinds of people they know. The whole world, they begin to build a relationship. And from that little, little core family that they have, all of a sudden they discover as they grow what a huge world they're living in. Well, same with spirituality. As we live in this small world and we want to move into spirituality, what happens is the same thing. We begin to discover what a huge world spirituality is as we ascend through the rungs of the ladder. That's it. Same thing. So we have here Asiya, Yetzirah, Beriya, Atzilut, Adam, Kadmon. We are going up exactly the same way as we were descended to attain complete perfection. And this whole description, the whole thing that we're going through, the whole study progress and the whole attitude to the study, how we study, how we develop through the wisdom of Kabbalah, develop with Kabbalah, influences the advancement of the dot in the heart until it gets to a point where it now goes up. It wants to ascend and it is ready to exist in the reality of the Creator. So the Kabbalistic texts are always talking about the roots, but they do use words called branches in order to describe the upper worlds. So when we're studying, we must be very careful not to take words that are from this world and relate it to our spiritual development as if it was talking about this world. So when we talk about light, we must make sure we understand that light is not how we understand it in this world. Or when we take the word, for example, masach, it's a screen. We need to understand that the screen is not the screen that's on our television or on our TV or on our computer monitor. Screen means the ability to reflect upon the Creator's relationship to me with a certain attitude. That's what a screen means. How I can reciprocate the Creator's relationship to me in a way that matches His attitude. So that's called a screen. So all these things, although are from this world in terms of words, they have a completely different meaning that we need to aspire to live in spirituality. Let's read a little bit more and see what the Kabbalists are telling us. Thus, there is not an element of reality or an occurrence of reality in a lower world that you will not find its likeness in the world above. It is as identical as two drops in a pond, and they are called root and branch. That means that the item in the lower world is deemed a branch of its pattern found in the higher world, being the root of the lower element, as this is where the item in the lower world was imprinted and made to be. So, for example, all the mountains, the planets, the trees, the animals, humans, all of us, actually, the whole of reality, let's say, I don't know, I'll just call it the whole of reality, okay? Here is actually a copy from here. The whole of reality, the roots of reality. Okay, oops, let's do that. Yeah, so everything that's in this world, all the planets, the plants, I don't know, the mountains, rivers, you name it, everything, animals, humans, everything that exists here also exists in the upper worlds, in Asya, Bria, Asya, Yetzirah, Bria, Atzilut, and Adam Kadmon. All of these worlds also have everything that is in this reality. So it's like a copy of everything imprinted in everything. Right then, any questions there, Anthony?
No questions right off.
No questions, you're all doing me a favor, okay? Now Kabbalists, let's read a little bit more. Let's see what they're talking about. Still, I'm in the essence of the wisdom of Kabbalah. It's on page 26 in this green big book. Kabbalists have found a set and annotated vocabulary, sufficient to create an excellent spoken language. It enables them to converse with one another of the dealings in the spiritual roots in the upper worlds by merely mentioning the tangible branch in the world that is well defined in our corporeal senses. So sometimes when Kabbalists are talking and writing in their books, because they're writing it, other Kabbalists are also in that spiritual sensation. They understand what they're talking about. So let's say a Kabbalist is talking about, I don't know, a cow or a bull or a donkey or a chair or a table in this allegorical way. A Kabbalist who reads what that Kabbalist wrote can actually relate to it because they're in the same sensation. So by the words of this world, they're describing to us spirituality. So an ox and a cow, actually, it's wisdom and mercy. Okay, it's spirituality. They have meanings, right? So they're not actually talking about two animals, but they're talking about two qualities that exist in spirituality. That these Kabbalists are inside of. They're feeling this sensation. Obvious that they don't need to talk about. I don't know. They don't need to talk about McDonald's farm, right? Okay, or the animals there, or if they're talking about certain, I don't know, certain specific events, they're referring to always spiritual sensations. The listeners understand the uproot to which this corporeal branch points because it is related to it, being its imprint. So everything, okay, if they're talking about, let's say, a flower, for example, there's a nice article called The Lily Among the Thorns, okay, in the book of Zohar. The lily among the thorns. So it's like it's as if it's talking about a flower, planted among thorns, but it's not. It's actually talking about something that relates to its spiritual essence, which is up here. The thorns also relate to something. Let's say these are all thorns, okay? They're also relating to something in spirituality. All right? So it's very important for us to understand these things, that all of these stories in the book of Zohar, or all these concepts that are explained to us in the Tree of Life, in the study of the 10 Sefirot, in the Sulam commentary in the Zohar, they're only referring to spiritual concepts. Okay? What else can we say? Although there cannot be a verbal expression in their spiritual place, as it is above any imagination, they have earned the right to be expressed by utterance through their branches, arranged before our senses here in the tangible world. So the Kabbalists had to find a way to describe spirituality. How are we going to tell our kids anything? We do the same thing, don't we? For example, before they can actually eat, I don't know, kids are growing up, there's certain things they can't eat straight away, right? Okay. For example, you can't give your kids, what can't you give your kids?
Well, you shouldn't give them too much sugar.
Okay, so you can't give them too much sugar, right? But you have to
spicy things.
Or spicy things, right? But you have to describe to them somehow that this is sweet and it's not good. All right? So you're using something that you're not giving the kid, okay, and saying, listen, this is also, although this tastes really good, okay, you can't have any. Okay, so the kid's trying to get his head around how that logic works. Okay, so we're like that as well. The Kabbalists are describing to us a certain state, and we're saying, well, what are you talking about? I'm not there. I haven't touched it. I haven't tasted it. I don't know what you're talking about. It's true, but this doesn't defeat the fact that they can describe something to us even if we don't feel it. Okay, so for example, same with spicy pepper, like Anthony just said. Okay, you don't want to give the kid a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old really hot spicy pepper before you expect that this is not going to happen and you're not getting it, even though the kid wants it. You say, listen, you're not getting it. Okay, it's spicy, it's hot, you're going to feel really bad. So the kid doesn't understand, still wants it, but the parent, doesn't give it to the kid. So the kid's in this confused stance, all right, not knowing what it is, how it is. So we're in that kind of situation as well when they're talking about certain things that are seemingly in front of our eyes, as like the lily in the thorns, or lily amongst the thorns. It's seemingly right in front of us. We can see what it is, but what they're describing and how we should be feeling that state in spirituality is a completely different thing. So the kid is looking at the red pepper and saying, well, it's just a red pepper. It's like a little plant, or it's like a little, I don't know, part of a salad that I normally eat anyway. What's the big deal? Okay, but if he or she was to taste it, probably get a really bad stomach ache. Okay, not to mention bad tongue.
A burning sensation.
That's right. All right. So the last thing we want, that is coming out the other end in a really bad way. Okay. So that's the whole situation with us as well. So we're not really in there, but they're trying to find ways to describe to us the situation. Now, that is the nature of the spoken language among Kabbalists, by which they convey their spiritual attainments from person to person and from generation to generation, both by word of mouth and in writing. They fully understand one another. Okay, this is very important because they're at the same degree, just like having this chili pepper. When we both know what this chili pepper is all about, we understand each other. Okay? With all the required accuracy needed for negotiating in research of the wisdom. So the whole concept is that they understand each other because they're both there. Now, some Kabbalists might be at a higher level. He might have eaten that whole pepper and might really really felt the spice, the burn, and so on. While another Kabbalist might just have taken a little bit from the end just to check it out. Okay, but at the end of the day, they have an understanding. One at a much deeper level, and one at a much shallow level. But they both have an understanding of that burning sensation. All right. Whew. So as we drew here, how can we conclude this lesson? We can conclude this lesson quite similarly to our approach that we went over last lesson. What we have to understand and get our heads around is, this is probably the hardest thing to get your head around in the wisdom of Kabbalah. Okay, you as a person come to study the wisdom of Kabbalah, and you're studying authentic Kabbalistic books which are talking about our relationship with the Creator. This, in essence, is attracting light to you, and that light develops you and it brings you wisdom. This is quite similar to how we study any wisdom in this world. When we first study, I don't know, physics, chemistry, biology, we don't know. We're just reading a book. But as we decapitate some animal and open them up and slice them into bits and pieces, we begin to understand what the book is talking about. Because we can say, oh, well, that was the organs, that's the intestines, that's the stomach, and that is, oh, disgusting. Okay, so the book was telling us what was inside that mouse or inside that body. And as we opened it up, cut it up, we saw that what the book was talking about is true. Okay, because we can now see it and feel it. But until that, that real application of going into that body and really checking it out, to us it's still a bit blurry. It's still knowledge, right? It's knowledge. It's not really wisdom. It's knowledge. There's knowledge that there's a body, and in this body there are certain organs, and this is where they're placed. Okay, now we cut them up, we begin to feel them, we begin to see them, we begin to understand what they're really, how they're all connected. We begin to get a much deeper understanding. Why? Because now we're living it. This is why the light that develops us brings wisdom, because it allows us this desire to move forward, this desire to attain what's in the book, attracts to us our next phase of development, just like the demonstration I gave with kids or with anyone who's studying something. Okay, so this light might be a little bit of a, question mark, and, might be a bit blurry getting our heads around it, but still, at the end of the day, it works in the same manner that it does here. And it should be working in the same manner due to the law of root and branch. Okay, so whatever we learn here, we're also getting wisdom and knowledge, and we're learning about this world. So if we're learning about spiritual worlds, it's only logical that it should open up a sensation inside of us about spiritual worlds. 1 + 1 = 2. Whatever is here is also in the roots. So what we have to do is build ourselves, or we can call this whole thing here an environment. So we build ourselves an environment where we can correctly apply the wisdom of Kabbalah. Wisdom of. Right, there we go. And through that environment, we should be really getting fed and nourished, just like a person gets nourished and fed by knowledge and wisdom at a university or a course or even an apprenticeship. For example, an apprentice to a carpenter, at first, he or she probably doesn't have the slightest idea about the varieties of wood and how things work and how to cut them, how to treat them, what kind of varnish to use for what kind of wood, and all these kind of things, how to make joints and nothing. But as he or she grows up next to the master, that apprentice starts to understand and get a sensation, a feeling for the wood. Why? Because you're constantly working with it. It becomes a part of your senses. You begin to delve into the wood. It's just like really feeling it. Okay? And same here with spirituality. It's a matter of how much effort we put into something that allows us to open this new sensory organ towards spirituality. So just like effort pays off in this world, effort for our spiritual development also, through the right environment and the right study conditions, applies to our spiritual development in developing this special thing called the soul, in which we can perceive, understand, and completely adhere to this reality, just like the Creator, and be a participant, an active participant in creation as a partner to the Creator, to this governing force. All right, and I do believe that concludes our lesson for today. I know we haven't had much questions. However, you can always send your questions through the Education Center email address. Feel free to ask anything about the wisdom of Kabbalah, and we'll try to help you as best we can. If you also feel like you'd like to read some books, but you don't know where to start, please ask us as well. We'll be more than happy to try and guide you as to where you can get some books or texts or even other lessons that might help you with your questions and queries. You'll find as we move forward in the wisdom of Kabbalah that this is a very, very deep science. And it really is a science because it's a science about discovering yourself in reality. And the more you discover yourself in this reality, you'll understand that it is a very, very deep ocean, an amazing wisdom, which will allow you to get your head around, your sensations around, towards everything that happens, why things happen, why they should have exactly happened as they did, to in fact understand that and to know why everything that happened to us should have exactly been the way it did happen is already a huge knowledge that clarifies for us all the mist about the questions that we had previously. If you think about it, most of the things that happen to us, we even don't know why happened. We just go through something and we're just left with a big fat question mark. Why me? Well, this wisdom resolves all that. It reconciles your existence in this reality. And to already know all that, it's priceless. So I really hope you enjoyed this lesson. Please join us for the next lesson as we'll be discovering how to build a unique approach to the study so that we can get the best. So it'll be a follow-up to this lesson, how we can build the right attitude, the right environment, how we can kind of coordinate ourselves properly so we can have a proper approach to study the wisdom of Kabbalah correctly in order to get the maximum out of it in a short period of time. We hope the lessons are going well for you. Please feel free to also jot down any comments or anything that you'd like special or extra so that we can help you further. If we can, we'll be more than happy to do it. You'll also note that at this lesson we opened up the YouTube chat option as well. So if you're watching live on YouTube, you're more than happy to ask questions there as well. Also feel free to use our Facebook page to get in touch and we'll be more than happy to help you. Until next lesson, have a great day, take care of yourselves, all the best.
Bye-bye.